Hello there. Good evening, everybody. This is I.H. Shehan, and this is session number 25, Advanced English of the Language Mantra channel. For quite some time now, we have been discussing clauses, and today we are supposed to discuss the adjective clause. But I think before we discuss the adjective clause, it is necessary to be familiar with certain concepts, grammatical categories. Those categories are relative pronoun, relative adverb, then the concept of antecedent, then relative clause, and finally it is adjective clause. So let's see those things. What is a relative pronoun? It may be a single word or it may be a phrase, but it's a pronoun. And the main function of a relative pronoun is to join two parts of a sentence. One part is the principal clause, the other part is the subordinate clause. Let's have an example and make the concept clear. So, I talked to my uncle who was waiting at the station. I tell you, this word who is a relative pronoun. So, what is the function of this word who here? Who is who? Number one, this who actually serves as a conjunction. It joins two parts. I talked to my uncle and who was waiting at the station. These two parts are joined by who. How? The second part is clear. Actually, who is the subject of the subordinate clause. And see the first part, this who does not exist. It is not, a valid word unless it refers back to my uncle. Actually, who refers back to my uncle. This my uncle actually is the antecedent, without which this who does not exist. At least it becomes an orphan. We do not understand who this who is. Therefore, this who, its existence is very much crucial, and it totally depends on the existence of a noun, that is uncle. So uncle gives validity to this word who. Now you see how these two parts, the first part is the principal clause, I talked to my uncle, and second part is who was waiting at the station. These two parts are joined together, and number two, who refers back to my uncle. This my uncle is called antecedent. Now, we very frequently come across this word who or other relative pronouns. We may not know them as relative pronouns, but we know those words by their face. So what are those words? Actually, we have who, we have whom, we have which, we have whose, we have that. These are relative pronouns. So relative pronouns are the words we frequently use. And whenever we read a book, whenever we read a newspaper, these relative pronouns just dance around us. But many of you may not know that these words are called relative pronouns. And these words have, direct relationship with what we know as adjective clause. We'll talk about that later. But let's see these words. Who. Who, actually this one who replaces the noun word. And it becomes the subject of a subordinate clause. Then we have whom. Whom is a very frequently used word. Then we have which, again, it refers to some inanimate object frequently. Then we have whose, possession, or some sort of relationship that is indicated by this word whose. Then that is a universal sort of word. It can be used to refer to some animal, it can be used to refer to some inanimate object, and it can be used to refer to some animate object as well. So these are the important relative pronouns. And we have one example already verified, and we have seen this who becomes a relative pronoun, and we know the function of this word. Next come another word. My teacher was looking for the book. My teacher was looking for the book which he had misplaced. So my teacher has misplaced a book. That book is referred to as which. So which refers back to book, and which introduces another clause, that is a subordinate clause. This is the function. It joins two parts of a sentence. One is the principal part and the other is the subordinate part. So this is all about who and which, and these relative pronouns have the same function in a sentence or in sentences. So this is, you must remember, you know relative pronouns. Now you know their functions also. Grammatically, you are aware of these words. Now we come to relative adverb. We are talking about, adjectival clause. So why adverb? Yeah, that is the interesting part. Sometimes some relative adverbs function to join two parts. The same way we have relative pronouns to function. That is the interesting part, and we will discuss this part later in detail. So you just remember when, where, why, how. These are in fact adverbial words, but these words may function as or in the same way relative pronouns do. We can get one or two examples. I know the building where you lived for years. I know the building. Building is a noun, and then comes where. Where is an adverb. But here in this particular sentence, where is actually joining these two parts. Where you lived for years, and where refers back to building, that is the antecedent part. So antecedent is a word that gives validity to this word where. You see another word. She didn't give the reason why she left so suddenly. She didn't give the reason. Reason is noun. Then why, an adverb. But this adverb behaves like an adjective because this is a noun, and this noun is described by this part. So this is interesting about relative adverb in this sentence. Let's see antecedent in a different kind of sentence. My father called me to tell that he won't come for dinner. Now this he, who is this he? Until and unless I recognize this father as the antecedent of he, the sentence becomes meaningless. So this he actually refers back to its antecedent, my father. That means my father gives meaning to this he. And now we understand who this he is. My father, this part is the noun part, and he is the pronoun part. And we know that a pronoun is a word that replaces a noun. So the word that is replaced by a pronoun, sometimes in a sentence, that particular noun becomes the antecedent. Now relative clause. Relative clause means a clause that is somehow related to another clause. That is relative clause, or some relative pronoun is used in that particular clause. Relative pronoun, we have already said who, whom, which, whose, that, and also some relative adverbs. And one of them is a relative clause. So which one is a relative clause in this sentence? I met a traveler who told me the story. Which one is the relative clause? This one, who told me the story, is the relative clause, because this clause somehow depends on I met a traveler. I met a traveler is the principal clause, and who told me the story is the subordinate clause. So you understand this one. Another sentence you may take. Teacher was looking for the book which he had misplaced. Which he had misplaced. This is a relative clause. And a relative clause is always a subordinate clause, because this relative pronoun does not have the strength of a subject unless it refers back to the antecedent. So this is the relationship in this particular sentence. So you must understand relative pronoun and relative clause. And if you understand relative clause, then your understanding of adjective clause is 90% done, and that we will take up in our next session. So you try to understand this. I think you have already understood this. This is not a very difficult thing. Only remember these words and try to see how they function in a sentence. They have two functions. They join two parts, two clauses together. And this relative pronoun refers back to its antecedent for its existence, for its validity, for its identity. That is all that we have to understand. So I think we should stop here today, and hope to meet you next week. Thank you very much.